Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I'm going to be doing a product review on this foundation by Kat Von D. If you guys are new to this channel, hi, my name is Ken, also known as MrKenDenis. So if you guys are new to my review format, I basically do a demonstration of a sponge and a brush application, and then I'll move on to like a proper review. If you guys would like to just skip ahead into the review proper, then just look at this timestamp and just fast forward. Now for the rest of you that want to see me apply this, I'm going to go through my wants and needs with the foundation, and also how I tend to apply foundation. So normally clean shaven, moisturize and whatnot, and then I apply a primer. So the primer I'm going to be using is this one from Maybelline. This one is the Face Studio Prime Pore Minimizing Primer. I honestly prefer silicone based primers for my foundation application. I just have a lot of issues on my skin that would benefit from a pore minimizing silicone based primer. So a little bit about myself. I am male, I am 29 years old, I have got large pores around here, a little bit of acne scarring. I have caused some of the pores to be like quite large on this side as well, and then I've got fine lines on my forehead that sometimes foundation tends to sink into, which is why I tend to apply a generous amount of silicone based primers, and I tend to massage it in different directions so that it fills the lines and pores in all directions, so that the foundation just tends to lie flat. Also with that, I have textural issues around my mouth. I've got facial hair, and obviously I can shave, but if I'm going to be wearing the foundation for quite some time, inevitably the hairs are going to poke out and just give me like this textured appearance on the lower part of my face, and I don't really hold too much of a high expectation for foundations like that, because with foundation you can cover color but not so much texture. Now speaking of color, I also tend to color correct my 5 o'clock shadow. I don't know if you guys can see, but I do have like that sort of like greeny blue haze there, so I tend to go for orange based color correctors. So that's also going to be another thing that I'm going to be judging the foundation on, pretty much how well it can cover a color corrector as well, because I am quite heavy-handed with my color correction, if I do say so myself. If you guys would like to see a review on how I color correct and whatnot, I'll leave a link on the screen and down in the description box down below. The reason why I say all this stuff and show you guys a little bit about my routine is so that you guys can see whether or not my routine is quite similar to yours, or my wants and needs are very similar to yours as well. That way you know if this review is going to be for you, because yeah, there's heaps of reviews for this foundation, but sometimes if the person reviewing it doesn't have the same wants and needs as you are, it might not be the most accurate or relevant video for you. Oh, I nearly forgot about my skin itself. I basically have normal skin. I have a slightly oilier T-zone. That's where foundation tends to break apart most of the time. And in terms of what I look for and what I need in a foundation, I look for medium coverage foundations or medium buildable foundations. Longevity is not necessarily a thing for me. There are sometimes I'd like a long-lasting foundation, but it's not at the top of my list. It's more about coverage, and if it can cover this is my biggest imperfection on my face, to be completely honest. Next I'm going to set that with a little bit of translucent powder. This one is the Nikkia Joy Cosmetics Velvet Finishing Powder. Now again, I'm reviewing the True Portrait Liquid to Powder Foundation. This one is in the shade Medium 42. If you guys would like a shade reference, I am roughly an NC30 from MAC, Barcelona in NARS, probably like number 7 or number 6 from Urban Decay. Now this foundation's a little bit dark for me, and last time I wore it, but I have been out in the sun, so it might be a good match today. So yes, I don't know if you guys can hear that. Yeah, it's one of those foundations you need to kind of like mix in. It's got a ball inside, and it's a squeezy tube type foundation, and that's where you kind of squeeze to dispense the product. Now, again, I'm going to be doing brush on this side, I'm going to do sponge on this side. I'm going to try and apply roughly the same amount. That way we can see which one requires the least amount of product. Okay, so I'm just going to do that. One line there, 3 lines there, and then a line over my 5 o'clock shadow. Let's see how far that goes. I'm also on the Sephora website just to see what kind of coverage it promotes. It says it's a lightweight medium coverage liquid to powder foundation, has 40 shades available. I'm going to be blending this out using a Sigma flat Kabuki F80 brush. So just your regular sort of like flat Kabuki brush. By the way, this brush is clean, so no primer or moisturizer used beforehand to blend. Alright, so I don't know if you guys can see that, but this foundation has definitely gone a long way. With the swirl, stip and swirl method, I felt like the foundation is a little bit lighter in coverage. I would say it's still definitely a medium coverage, but around my mouth where I did like that stippling method, I feel like it's definitely given it more coverage. Looks really good. I do, however, have to say I feel like it's clinging onto the texture around my mouth, and even after shaving sometimes I still have a little bit of textural issue. Yeah, I don't know if you guys can see that. No, I don't think so. I feel like the foundation's already set itself, to be honest, so I don't think I can blend too much more. But yeah, that's one layer so far. Now I'm going to apply roughly the same amount on the other side and use a beauty sponge. Alright, for beauty sponge I'm going to be using this one from Nakia Joy Cosmetics. This is one of her beauty sponges. I prefer to use the ball side for blending my foundation. Okay, so I think it's done a really good job at blending out the foundation everywhere else, but again, I don't really need too much coverage for the rest of my face. It's really just around my mouth where I've got that colour corrector that I need the most amount of coverage, and I think you can still see a bit of that colour corrector peeking through. And even if you just look at my cheeks, like on this side, I feel like it's definitely more coverage, whereas on this side, I feel like you can kind of still see a little bit of those imperfections that are currently on my skin. So are the results a little bit unusual compared to what I normally expect from foundations? Not really. I mean, that's always a given usually. It's usually a given. Sponges tend to absorb a little bit more product, but the foundation tends to sit a little bit better on the skin. And that's what I'm seeing right now. Again, I can see the foundation looks like one with the skin, whereas on the brush side it feels like it's sitting on the skin. But that's, like I said, that's a given usually. I'm gonna go ahead and apply a second layer, probably around the same amount of product for both sides, and we'll see if this foundation builds well. Honestly, 2 layers of the foundation is what I tend to go for, just because I like coverage. Just gonna use that on that side. Again, brush on this side. From experience, this foundation does build really nicely. Even if the first layer has already dried down to like that powdery finish, it still looks pretty good. And dare I say it, because sometimes when I look at the viewfinder it might look a bit different, this foundation is actually a pretty good match for me now that I've got a little bit of a tan. Right, I feel like I need a tiny bit of coverage here, so I'm just grabbing a little bit of that foundation on my forehead. I'm just going to bounce it more here. Honestly, I feel like at 2 layers, in terms of coverage, I feel like they're pretty much the same. I will, however, say the finish does look a little bit different at this point in time. The brush side's already kind of setting by itself. Again, I feel like texture is showing up around the mouth, whereas the rest of the face looks pretty good. Actually, no. Let me try and blend that out a little bit more. Okay, so I think personally on my skin, I prefer the sponge. It just looks so much more natural, more skin-like, whereas this one kind of just looks like your traditional makeup where it really looks like makeup. This one looks more like skin flawless. You can tell that you're wearing a bit of makeup, but it doesn't look too much. Dare I say it, I feel like with the brush it's almost kind of like cake face on me, but that's just with the foundation itself. Normally you can't tell the difference when I've got the rest of my makeup on. Ta-da! The rest of the makeup is on. Now I'm just going to repeat myself a little bit in terms of what I expect with this foundation, my wants and needs, just for those of you guys that have just fast forwarded to this bit. So I am 29 years old, male. I have got some fine lines, some open pores, like a bit of, I suppose, acne scarring where the pore has gotten a bit bigger because of an acne mark. And in terms of my skin type, I am normal. I have a bit of an oilier T-zone. In terms of what my wants and needs are, by the way, I've also got textural issues with my 5 o'clock shadow. In terms of my wants and needs, I do prefer a medium coverage foundation, medium full coverage foundation, simply because of my 5 o'clock shadow. That's my biggest concern. In terms of longevity, I don't really look for extremely long wear foundations. Obviously I will wear them for certain occasions, but it's not like a deal breaker for me. Okay, now that that's out of the way, let's talk about some of the promises this foundation has. I'm just currently on the Sephora app. It basically says it's a lightweight, medium coverage, liquid to powder foundation, sets to a long wear, airy matte finish in 40 shades that won't clog pores. Ideally for normal to oily skin and control shine, and so you can create the ideal canvas for any look. Also says, oh, effective flex with all expressions for a perfect skin look that moves with you. So I'm assuming that means it's not going to settle into your fine lines, like laugh lines, like forehead lines and stuff like that. And before I talk about my experience with the foundation, I just wanted to give you guys a little bit of an update in terms of the brush side and the sponge side. Now that I have like setting powder, the rest of my face makeup, and I've set it with a setting spray. So the one I used is by Morphe. This one is the continuous mist. And again, face powder, to set all that in, I use the Maybelline Fit Me Matte and Poreless. Now, I don't necessarily think it's essential that you set this foundation with a powder. I'm just in the habit of just setting with the powder. But I have worn this foundation without setting with a powder and it still looks pretty much the same. Okay, so looking up close and personal, I do feel that the foundation does look like it's still sitting on the skin with the brush side, but it's not as bad compared to when I had just applied the foundation. I still prefer the sponge side. Even when everything's all set and everything, I still, it's just personal preference, guys. That's just, you know, if you've got textural issues, you know, a sponge is your best friend. But if you have immaculate, very smooth skin, then you can get away with either or. Alright, let's talk about the promises and whether or not I think it lives up to that. So it says it's a lightweight, medium coverage, liquid to powder foundation. I'm probably not the best person to ask whether or not a product is lightweight on the skin, just because I'm so used to wearing full coverage makeup. I don't wear foundation every single day. I probably only wear it maybe 2 or 3 times a week just when I'm filming. When I do go to work, I very rarely wear makeup these days, but even that, I still can't really tell if the foundation is quite thick or like really clogging on the skin, so I can't really tell you about that. In terms of medium coverage, I do have to agree it is quite medium coverage, even though with a sponge I have to apply 2 layers of the foundation before I can get sort of like that medium full coverage that I am used to. I still think it rings true to that. It says it's a long wear, airy matte finish. Now, I'm not really sure what they mean by airy matte, but it definitely doesn't look like one of the traditional matte foundations where you look kind of dry and it just looks quite flat. It definitely still has sort of like that skin-like appeal that most people, I feel like these days, prefer. In terms of it long wear, I do have to say this is a relatively long wear foundation. I feel like around the 7-8 hour mark, this foundation still looks pretty good. Now, it doesn't have any ridiculous claims of like 12 hour, 24 hour, 48 hour claim, anything like that, because honestly, who's going to try it for that long? But I don't think that this foundation is bad. I think it lasts really well around the 8 hour mark. That's when I tend to maybe want to blot and add some powder just to add a little bit of coverage again. Now it says here that it's available in 40 shades, which is a really good shade match, and it looks like they go pretty deep, and I'm not really sure about the fair shades, but they do have one that looks really fair. You guys tell me. Again, I am using the shade medium number 42, which I think is a pretty good match. It's a nice sort of like yellowy shade, not olive, it's not peachy or anything like that. I feel like if you have a very similar background to myself, Filipino, and has more like yellow undertones, I feel like this is a very good representation. This has not seen sun, by the way, but that's like my skin actually, and this part of my neck has had some sun, but it has a bit of a tan, so I feel like it gives a really good color match. Now, does it not sit in your fine lines? No, it still does, but it's not as bad, I have to say. I do feel like with my forehead lines and my laugh lines, I still see it sort of like sitting in there, especially around the 6-7 hour mark. That's when like the makeup's kind of like worn out a little bit. I feel like it does sit in there, but it's not as noticeable, it's not as bad as other foundations I've tried out there, especially for a matte foundation. Matte foundations tend to do that a lot more on me, as opposed to like your normal satin or dewy foundations. I feel like it doesn't do that, which is really good, like I said, and that's also kind of why I'm not a huge fan of overly matte foundations, because it does sit in like the fine lines here and occasionally there as well. It says control shine, have to agree with that. Again, around 6-7 hour mark, that's when things start to break down. 8 hour mark is when I need to touch up. Yeah, I think pretty much all bases are covered, and I think it's pretty accurate. So this foundation comes in a 30ml bottle. I do like the design, I do like it. I just don't like the fact that it's white, just because of how messy the packaging can get. I don't know if you guys can tell, but that... Look, I'm not the neatest person on the planet, so I don't really mind a little bit of smudging, a little bit of dirt here and there, but for a white bottle, it's like I have to keep it clean. So that's just my only real critique for it, but otherwise I think it's a really good foundation. So if I'm comparing this to the original Kat Von D Lock-It foundation, I would say the Lock-It foundation is a little bit drier compared to this in terms of the formula, but definitely has more coverage compared to this. By the way, if you guys would like me to do a side-by-side comparison, definitely let me know down in the comment box down below. That's probably a good video idea, but just from memory, I think the Kat Von D one was just, but from memory, I think the Lock-It foundation was a lot drier, and if I didn't prep my skin right, it would really show like the lines and textures on my skin. Whereas with this, I feel like there's more leeway, there's a little bit more give in terms of not prepping your skin right. I still think you should prep your skin right, but you know, for days that you're a little bit off or dehydrated, you know, your skin's still gonna look pretty good with this, even if you don't moisturize heavily. Hey guys, go, that is my review of this foundation by Kat Von D. Again, it's the True Portrait Foundation in medium number 42. I have to keep reading the label. But yeah, those are my thoughts and opinions on the product. If you guys would like me to review any other products, other foundations, definitely let me know down in the comment box down below, and I'll try and get to you guys as soon as I can. But if you guys would like to see more of me and my content, definitely head over to Instagram and TikTok. Now I have a TikTok. They're both at MrKenDenis, and yeah, that's pretty much it for me. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will catch you guys in the next video. Bye!